Hello and welcome to FinextraTV. I'm Alex Lipich, and joining us today in the virtual studio is Kannan Rasappan, the CEO of Banfico. Kannan, thank you ever so much for joining us today in the virtual studio.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
It's great to see you. So Kannan, what do you think will be the biggest challenges ahead of compliance with IP regulation in October 2025? And how will the verification of payee mandate impact this, do you think?
Yeah, so instant payment regulation mandates, verification of payee or confirmation of payee, as we say in UK, on all the, transfers. So before making a payment, instant or not instant as well, you need to do the verification of payee. This is kind of came into the regulatory norms purely because of the rising of socially engineered fraud or authorized push payment fraud. People are getting scammed, so it's come into the instant. I think with the mandatory adoption of instant payment, the fraud is likely to jump. They talk about it, and confirmation of payee or verification of payee is a low-hanging fruit. So the biggest challenge, I would say, is ability to do verification of payee with every other PSP or banks in the market. So there are 5,000 plus institutions. So we should have connectivity to those ones. That's the biggest challenge. Banfico also does in open banking or PSD2 compliance. There we just expose the APIs and we say we are compliant. That's great. But then this is more challenging because it's not only exposing the API, but you have to consume the APIs of all the other banks, and there is no standardization, or at least a pan-Europe standard. There is a lot of fragmentation in the market. I think that's where the biggest challenge comes in.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned a lot of challenges there, so it'll be interesting to see how those can kind of be overcome as well moving forwards. What do you think, or why is interoperability a concern, do you think, Kannan? And why should every PSP have the capability to perform VoP with any PSP in the EE region, do you think?
Yeah, so the interoperability, what we are referring, at least in the context of verification of payee, as I said previously, there are different schemes, so the account verification is not new. Some countries already had it and they're running it. And then there is also something like EPC, European Payment Council, coming with its own scheme. And most of the banks are likely to join. But then if you look at France, Netherlands, Italy, or Spain, or UK, we all have some existing schemes and existing setup, So we know this is how we do the verification of payee or confirmation of payee. But then there is also new ones coming in. So in Nordics, we have Nordic Payment Council has released a scheme, and European Payment Council is about to release a scheme. There could be many more, so. But you have to get a response from a PSP who might be participant in a different scheme. So you need to make sure the schemes are all interoperable to an extent. It's not only discovery of the participant. Let's say there is a PSP in Nordics, so they are registered with the NPC scheme, Nordic Payment Council scheme, so we can discover them and then say, okay, this is a request coming from France, and we need to go to Nordics, get the response data, and come back. But then we can do the discovery, but there is also changes in the standards and the schema, right? So the data, what kind of request you're sending, what kind of response you're receiving, that is also going to be changing per scheme. Some do a scoring, match scoring. Some do a code, say this is an absolute code. Some could even just do a traffic light signal, red, amber, green, So how do you make these standards interoperable is a big challenge. There is also liability and participation rights. If I'm participating in a scheme, how do I participate? can I participate here, or do I have to participate in every little scheme? Would there be any kind of sponsorship that some banks can allow you to enter EPC scheme? So a lot of these are practical challenges in implementing, interoperability between different schemes. And the more you dig, the more you discover challenges, even within the interoperability, name matching rules, liability, eligibility to participate, eligibility to be interoperable. So many things comes in, and that's why a lot of the discussions are happening. When we're running this webinar on 13th June, where we are bringing the industry experts from each individual scheme, and we're going to talk about interoperability. I think over there we'll get the real value from hearing from the industry experts. So yeah, hopefully we get a bit more clarity as we move on or as we progress.
Yeah, really interesting insight. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned the webinar. We'll be touching on that in just a moment. With regards to cross-border payments, opening the door to potential scams and increased fraud, how will VoP ease financial crime and sort of stop banks from working in silos, so to speak?
Yeah, so we're already working in silos within the industry. At least now the banks are opening up, or mandate to open up, so before PSD2, before confirmation of payee or verification of payee, we have to, we never kind of interacted with other PSPs, shared the fraud data with other PSPs. But in these days, we are a bit more, banks are aware of what's happening. They can't just work in silos, so they are getting, collaboration from partners and also peers, so they're able to do confirmation of payee, at least in UK, 400 institutions, we'll talk to 400 institutions by this October, and hopefully the 5,000 institutions in Europe will talk. The cross-border is not new. Even within Europe, you have the cross-border capability or multi-currency transfers, multi-currency validations. But when you go cross-border outside the European Union, the big challenge is GDPR, because you have a European citizen data, the name, and you wanted to take it outside the country, or outside the jurisdiction. And people, or at least the PSPs, are worried about the liability, what could be the exposure in this. And that's one of the major hurdles we are always saying. And also, whom you're sharing, how is it processed? A lot of this is a challenge, even within the scheme. So it's that kind of, and also the liability, if there is a breach, if there is something, who's liable, and, how do we mitigate the risk of that? And that's where we see liability. But then the positive side, today's modern payments industry is cross-border, it's global. So the fraud is committed, the money could leave the country in matter of seconds, so you have to work, and also different jurisdictions have different, treaties, to extradite or, for any financial crime. So people just have to be aware of such scenarios. But it's once you start doing the cross-border, it's going to improve the general hygiene of the payment industry. So it's not that money has left the country, or why did we allow the money to leave the country? A lot of this will come in.
Yeah, I think that the kind of key word I really picked up on there is collaboration. We all need to collaborate, we all need to come together, and having that support network is key, as you've identified. So there are kind of many different angles to this discussion, Kannan. We've looked at a lot ourselves already. How will you be covering these hot topics, if you like, in your upcoming webinar that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I think the next October is not far away, so, and by this time we need to kind of get to a industry consensus, like saying, okay, this is how we are going to approach this industry problem, and how we are going to address this problem. the collaboration is key, but not collaboration also takes time, so you need to educate the PSPs, you have to educate the scheme participants, and then work towards a solution. And sometimes there is reluctance, sometimes there is people are not ready, or they don't have time and availability and budget to talk about these things. That's where we see kind of a challenge, the preparedness, readiness. So the more we educate or more we create awareness about this big challenge, the better. And that's why we are organizing this webinar. So again, it's a industry neutral, webinar. It's not like Banfico. We do have our, competitors or partners in this panel. So we have people from different schemes, different value propositions, and how we can work together, not looking at the competition, but looking at the more collaboration to solve the problem. Again, not one vendor could solve the whole problem, so, and we don't have time to do this in, one vendor. For example, we might be strong in Nordics and another vendor is strong in another. How do we then create an interoperable platform? And that's what we are trying to get out of this webinar, and make sure we are kind of leaders in this, in pushing this awareness and education. So it's certainly going to be a huge value for people who's going to join this webinar.
Thank you so much, Kannan. So a lot of challenges ahead, but a lot of exciting times as well. It'll be interesting to see just how things develop moving forwards. So just to say good luck with that webinar. We hope it all goes well. And thank you ever so much for giving us your time in our virtual studio today. Really nice speaking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kannan.
Bye.
Take care.